Forklift trucks are a lot like tugboats. By using the laws of physics, they give one person the power to move large loads with seemingly effortless precision. Watch a tug nudge a vessel into its berth. It's a marvel of the captain's skill and competence. Not much different when you watch a seasoned forklift operator. Pallets are smoothly stacked to the ceiling, or a single item is picked from a trailer or a crowded warehouse. Yet not every operator is this impressive. In fact, each year more than 100 people are killed and almost 95,000 injured in accidents involving forklift trucks. The reason? The same laws of physics that allow these vehicles to make great lifts also make them subject to great mishaps.
Hey, Jim, get you inside.
They tip over, drop loads, trap people, or fall off ramps or docks. In the next few minutes, we're going to see what separates the skilled forklift operator from one who needs to learn new on-truck behavior. We'll look at forklift design, controls, and instrumentation, the pre-use inspection, and the load. To become a certified forklift operator, OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, requires that you know everything about your equipment and know everything about your load, and finally, know everything about how your equipment fits with your work environment. Forklift trucks, or forklifts for short, are also called powered industrial trucks. They come in a variety of sizes and designs, may operate on battery power, propane, gasoline, or diesel fuel. Each forklift is designed to perform specific tasks in set situations and has the controls, attachments, tires, and lifting capacity to perform its assigned job. Using it in any other way is not only unprofessional, it's dangerous. That's why every operator needs to learn all operating requirements for the particular forklift in use. Knowing how to operate one type of truck doesn't mean you're allowed to operate another type. In fact, you'll qualify to operate each type of forklift before you operate independently. One of the key things to remember about forklifts is that only their basic design is the same. In use, they have different controls, weight capacities, and restrictions on where they can operate. Read the operator's manual for specific information about the forklift you'll operate. The identification plate mounted in the forklift gives the rated load capacity. That's critical information that every skilled operator knows and follows. The skilled operator also learns that every workplace and even every lift and carry is different. That's why your hands-on training is so important. It lets you learn about the special risks and problems you face at your work site and gives you a chance to practice so you and your truck work as a team. First-time operators are often surprised to find that a forklift is not like a car. It has different controls and steers in a very different way. Forklifts steer from the rear. When turning, the rear end swings in a circle around the drive wheels, which are in the front. Because drive wheels support most of the load, the truck is less stable when turning than when moving in a straight line. You also have less steering control when turning, especially when loaded. The forklift's steering and drive mechanism also make it difficult to stop quickly and dangerous to swerve, for example, to avoid a pedestrian. Forklifts also differ from cars in other ways. They operate equally well in forward or reverse, but steer differently in each direction. They also have blind spots that vary depending on the type of load. For the operator, these differences require constant attention to load and worksite conditions and the ability to know and follow good safety practices. When you enter a forklift, what you'll find depends on the manufacturer of the lift truck, its design, and rating. Some forklifts have a seat for the operator, while on others the operator stands. If a seat belt is available, you must use it. It keeps you in the truck in case of an accident and has saved many operators from being crushed by the load or forklift. In all forklifts, you'll see a mass of controls and instruments. Although they vary from truck to truck, their functions are similar. Typical controls include a wheel, crank, or arm for steering, and a key or toggle switch for starting. You'll also find a service brake and a parking brake. Movement is controlled by an accelerator, either a pedal or a lever. On some trucks, the accelerator is combined with a direction selector, sort of like a joystick on a video game. You'll also find load control levers. These manipulate lift, tilt, and attachments. Some also allow load rotation and side shifting. There will be a horn or some other means of warning, and lights ranging from headlights to a warning strobe. Electric trucks, those powered by a battery, typically have an hour meter and a battery discharge indicator. These tell you hours of operation and battery condition. Internal combustion trucks, whether powered by propane, diesel, or gasoline, usually have an hour meter, an ammeter or indicator light, a fuel gauge, an engine temperature indicator, and an engine oil pressure indicator. It's your job to learn every control and instrument in the truck you will be operating. Memorize their location and study how they operate. During hands-on training, you'll get to practice what you've learned. You'll be an expert at handling the controls before you qualify to operate a forklift. As a forklift operator, you're charged with making sure your machine is in good working order every time you use it. You need to conduct 2 inspections, a power plant inspection and an equipment inspection. Your facility may have a standard checklist for you to use. Be sure to fill it out and turn it in every time. Completed forms prove that you're following safety requirements. Once you get used to performing the pre-shift inspection, it'll take only a few minutes. Your safety requires that you never shortcut these inspections. The first part of every forklift inspection involves the power plant, either an electric battery or a fuel system that uses diesel, gasoline, or propane. If your forklift is battery powered, check battery condition before you start the truck. In most facilities, a baking soda solution or special cleansers are used to neutralize spills and to remove corrosion from terminals. Make sure these are nearby and ready to use before you check your battery. Look for damage like cracks or holes and for corrosion or splits. Make sure each cell is sealed securely, that the cables are intact, and terminal post connections tight. Each vent cap should be secure and holes clear of dust and debris that could block ventilation. This keeps dangerous gases from building up and causing a fire or explosion. Remember, anytime you work around batteries, you're working with acid. Never touch or approach a battery without wearing protective gear. At the least, you'll need acid-resistant gloves and eye protection. Depending on the work you're doing, you may also need an apron or other protective clothing and special shoes. Because battery acid is dangerous, you should know where the nearest eye wash station, emergency shower, or faucet is located. If you get acid on you, rinse the affected areas with water for at least 15 minutes. If you splash acid in your eyes, hold your eyelids open while you rinse. There also should be a fire extinguisher handy. Know where it's located and how to use it properly if a fire starts. Also, check for exits in case you have to evacuate quickly. Never smoke or allow anyone nearby to smoke or do hot work in the battery area. Hydrogen gas that escapes through the vent holes is extremely flammable. Part of your job as a forklift operator is to make sure signs prohibiting flames and smoking are respected. When you're finished using the forklift, you'll need to charge the battery so it's ready for the next user. In some facilities, you'll remove the battery, Take it to a charging area and exchange it for a fully charged battery. If you charge the battery yourself, park in the charging area. Turn off the truck, set the brake, and chock the wheels if the charging area isn't level. Plug the battery connector into the charger. Turn on the charger and make sure the indicator light shows it's operating properly. When the battery is charged, turn off the charger, disconnect the cables, and plug the battery into the forklift. If your forklift is powered by gasoline, diesel, or propane, your check of the power plant is different. Check the fuel tank for cracks, broken wells, rust, or any other damage. Make sure valves and nozzles are secure and that there are no leaks. Anytime you have to handle the fuel tank, do it outside, away from the building and people. Just like with a battery-powered truck, smoking, flames, and hot work are never allowed in the fueling area or around propane tanks. The second part of your pre-use inspection involves checking equipment for damage and proper operation. Again, this inspection is done at least daily or at the beginning of each shift. The mast is the upright section that contains a set of tracks housing ball-bearing rollers and chains. The mast may tilt forward or backward or shift from side to side. Inspect the mast for broken or cracked welds, dents, or other damage. Make sure roller tracks are well greased and chains are free to travel. Within the mast is what is called the carriage. It contains the rollers that allow the load to move up and down. Forks are mounted to the carriage. Lift and tilt are controlled by a system of hydraulic cylinders. Next, inspect the hydraulics. First, check the level of the hydraulic fluid. Be sure hoses are not leaking or cracked and that fittings are secure. Then, inspect lift and tilt cylinders for damage or leaks. Last, examine the cylinder mounting hardware to make sure everything is tight. All forklifts have forks that pick up the load. Hold it during transit and put it in place at the new location. Forks tilt forward or backward. The operator also can adjust the space between forks to lift loads of varying widths. Inspect forks for cracks or damage along the blade and at the heels. Make sure they are equally spaced. On some forklifts, forks can be replaced with special attachments for carrying oddly shaped loads like drums or long loads like pipes. Some can be used with a platform for elevating people. Also mounted to the carriage is the backrest. It keeps the load from falling back when forks are tilted back. The overhead guard is designed to keep falling objects from hitting the operator. Remember, the overhead guard is not strong enough to protect you from a heavy load that topples onto the truck. Check the overhead guard and the backrest for dents, loose fittings, or other problems. Next, move on to the tires. Look for excessive wear or splits, and make sure all wheel nuts are tight. Check that the rubber isn't separated from the rim. If your forklift has pneumatic tires, check the air pressure and adjust it for the surface you'll be driving on. Check the operator's manual if you're not sure of the right pressure. You'll also need to check the other fluid levels, including oil and coolant. Inspect the area around and under the forklift to see if fluids have leaked out since its last use. The final part of your pre-use inspection involves testing all systems with the forklift turned on. Check all gauges, indicators, and warning lights. If any gauges, indicators, or warning lights aren't working, turn off the forklift and report the problem so it can be fixed. Don't try to do it yourself. Only authorized personnel are allowed to repair forklifts. If everything checks out so far, you're ready to test the moving parts. This involves putting the forklift through its normal maneuvers while looking and listening for anything unusual. Make sure you're in a safe location, away from people, traffic, and overhead obstructions. Lift the carriage to its maximum height. Lower the carriage until it just clears the floor. Tilt the forks all the way forward. Bring them back. Check the steering. Make sure it turns the wheels smoothly and completely. If anything sounds noisy or hesitates, get it checked out. Turn on any lights and test the horn and other warning devices. Travel forward and stop. Then travel in reverse and stop. The brakes should feel smooth and operate properly. Finally, check the emergency brake and make sure all controls are back in their neutral position. If everything checks out, you're ready to go. If not, if you find a problem or suspect one, get it checked and corrected before you operate the truck. Up to this point, everything we've talked about involved the design and condition of the forklift. That's only part of your job as an operator. The other part deals with moving the load, or more precisely, the physics of the load. Things like balance, stability, capacity, and visibility. These are the things that separate the top flight operator from the rest. The professional knows that every load and every situation is different, and that knowledge and judgment are required on every lift and carry. The design of the forklift demands it. Think of the base as a triangle. Let's call it a stability triangle. The straight edge is the axle of the drive wheels. It supports the weight of the load and acts like the center support on a teeter-totter. The point of the triangle opposite the front edge is the steering point. Even if the lift truck you use has 4 wheels, its base still acts like a triangle, with the point being the middle of the steering axle. Keeping the downward force of the load, its center of gravity, within this stability triangle keeps the forklift stable and the load from crashing to the floor. Allowing the load to move outside the stability triangle makes both truck and load less stable, makes it subject to tipping, rolling, or dropping the load. In practice, this means your forklift and load become less stable whenever the load is above the ground, when you're turning, on slopes either front to back or side to side, when tilting the load forward or backward or side to side. Size and shape of the load, as well as where you carry the load on the forks, also affect stability. A compact load carried all the way back on the forks is closer to the drive axle, to the base of the stability triangle. A load, even if it's within forklift capacity, moved to the edge of elevated forks, can tip the forklift forward so you can't steer. A sharp turn can tilt a load, spilling it or pulling the lift over sideways. The same goes for driving on a slope. An uneven platform can tilt the load and roll the lift. What happens is that downward force encourages forklift stability, but shifting force, either to the side, front, or back, shifts outside the triangle, making your lift unstable. As a professional, your job is to constantly judge your load to make sure you keep the center of gravity, the downward force of the load, within the stability triangle. Knowing your machine is the best way to learn how to do this with every load. The operator's manual tells you the capacity of the forklift and explains how this changes depending on the load you are carrying. It also explains how attachments alter the stability and capacity of your forklift truck. Your job is to know your machine and know your load before you attempt to move it. Is the load well within the capacity limits of your forklift? Will its shape and the downward force of its weight affect your stability or your ability to see where you're going? You may need to split up the load to reduce its weight, or drive in reverse to increase your visibility, or both. You also need to know where you're taking the load. Will the route pose hazards? What kind of turns will you negotiate? How about ramps, slopes, rough ground, or obstacles? And finally, what's your destination? Can you get close enough? Can you pull straight in? Will any maneuvers affect your stability? Is the area free of overhead hazards like power lines, pipes, or ventilation equipment? Since operating a forklift requires special skills, not everyone can be a forklift operator. You'll be evaluated every 3 years to make sure you know how to handle your equipment and load safely. You may need additional training if the equipment or loads you carry change. And if you have an accident or a near miss, you may need supplementary training. In this program, we've looked at the design and function of the forklift, at issues like controls, power plant, and pre-use inspection, and at characteristics like stability, capacity, and visibility. This information, coupled with your hands-on training, is the first step in getting you qualified as a professional forklift operator. The second step, demonstrating your skill and understanding of the forklift with every load, is up to you.